Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tom Call You YouTube channel. I am using some slightly different software. This time I'm using StreamYard, which I've just got an account with and seems to be working really well. It worked pretty well for the SmackDown post show that I did with my colleague Rick Ucchino, so I'm essentially rolling with it now and seeing how it goes. If you're joining me today, there is going to be quite a bit of different topics to cover. Please do let me know if I have any issues with my audio or anything like that. I'm just going to post on Twitter that I am now live. The topics I'm going to be discussing today are going to be plans for Survivor Series, why the WWE are using depth charts when they haven't used them in a long time, AJ Styles going to WWE Raw potentially. Then I'm going to run down predictions for Payback, as well as some information on the plans for Sasha Banks and Bayley, and a preview of the G1 Climax. So I'm just going to post that onto Twitter so everyone knows where I am. Everyone can come and say hi. And then I will be saying hi to everyone here. Thank you for joining me. Welcome, Jacob. As part of the new software, I have the ability when I'm answering questions to do this. So thank you very much, Jacob, for just saying hi and giving me the chance to show that off a little bit. It also means every now and then I can throw out a banner that looks like this for anyone who is new and joining for the first time. So let's talk news. The first part on my list is going to be the current plans for Survivor Series. I'm hearing a lot of people talk about theories of what's going to happen at Survivor Series. One of the things being mentioned is this person defending the championship, potentially Orton versus McIntyre. To my knowledge, Survivor Series is still planned to be brand versus brand versus brand. That would mean that with the current champions, if we factor that Karrion Kross is still champion, even though it's currently vacant, it would have been The Fiend versus Drew McIntyre versus Karrion Kross. That would have been the plan based on the situation at current. However, as you might expect, things change. For Survivor Series, the plan is still brand versus brand versus brand. That does mean a very exciting prospect of Asuka versus Bayley versus Io Shirai. That's a really exciting prospect, if I do say so myself. It could also, of course, have Sasha Banks involved in some way. And one of the reasons she was winning the championship and they had that whole flirtation with Sasha long term as a champion was with that in mind. Really tease the prospect of Sasha Banks versus Bayley at Survivor Series, which is a way they could have simply kept it going. So those are the plans for Survivor Series. Still Starling says, I don't think I'm going to watch it live. Does that mean Survivor Series? If you're referring to Payback, which is the title of this video, I'm going to be watching it live. Anyone can join me on Twitter for my live streaming, well, live tweeting there, updating, and then I do reviews afterwards. That will be on Twitch this week. Next piece of news is why WWE are using depth charts at the moment. There was a story that came out recently, a report, I should say, in which someone got a look at the depth chart for the WWE SmackDown faces. At the top was Braun Strowman, and then I believe it was Matt Riddle immediately afterwards. There are some people who are not on those depth charts. The notable omission was, of course, Roman Reigns, who hadn't been certain of his return yet, so he wasn't on that list. In addition, you may say it's because of the heel now, but Roman Reigns is neither heel nor face. He is beyond the whole heel, face, side, and characteristics that you might expect. So why WWE using depth charts is because we have the draft coming up. They are both sides of Raw and SmackDown, and this includes NXT as well. So all three brands are currently building depth charts because there is such a mess at the moment when it comes to faces and heels. There are so few faces apparently in the company, and everyone seems to be turning heel. At the top of the Raw face depth chart is, of course, Drew McIntyre. After him is Kevin Owens, someone who has not been on TV very much, and then shortly after is Apollo Crews. Even though you have people like Rey Mysterio getting a push at the moment, it is mostly Dominic that is being actively pushed. Thank you to everyone joining us so far. By all means, ask questions, drop comments, click a like on the video. I do very much appreciate it. We are going to be talking now about AJ Styles potentially going to WWE Raw. Now, I do feel I'm able to talk on this with some authority because I reported on this here YouTube channel back in January that AJ Styles would be moving to SmackDown after WrestleMania. Hi, Jermaine, welcome. With this in mind, that AJ Styles would have been moving, or at least was being talked about moving back in January, we can say quite confidently AJ Styles did not move purely because of Paul Heyman. that may have been part of it, but there was a plan to move him as early as January, well before Gallows and Anderson were released, and well before the storyline with The Undertaker really kicked in. If you've been watching The Undertaker's documentary, it makes quite clear that it was booked quite late in the day, the return of The Undertaker to face AJ Styles. There was, and I discussed this on the initial video when I announced that this was going to be happening, there was a consideration of AJ Styles on Raw that they simply didn't give him enough to do, or at least he didn't have anything particularly exciting to do. That was one of the main reasons he went. As well, there was some mockery of him backstage, and he's answered claims about him being bullied. He wasn't bullied. He's exactly right when he says that he wasn't bullied. There was some mockery backstage. Randy Orton has very much confirmed that on After the Bell with Corey Graves since, and in fact on Twitter since. Soul Starling says NXT is back on Sci-Fi. It would be good. That was a report that came out recently that NXT would be back on Sci-Fi, not just the USA Network. That's a extra deal and an extra few eyes, and that is a good thing for NXT because it means they have an extra bit of leverage in the ratings also. If that has happened, that could be very good news. We have a first timer. The Star Wars Lounge says, "Hey man, what's the deal with Drew not defending tonight? Is he just having a night off, so to speak, or could he possibly interfere in Keith Lee versus Orton again, like on Raw?" My expectation is that Drew McIntyre will be interfering again. The idea here and the reason this was changed, because it was a match that was supposed to be happening on the card, it was supposed to be the headline match, is firstly they wanted to put some attention onto a main event featuring Roman Reigns. They wanted to make that the one singular big match of this card and give a lot of other people a chance. The original reason for this show was to have it as an overflow pay-per-view, which meant other people would be getting a chance. Ruby Riott versus the Iconics was always supposed to be on the card. Big E versus Sheamus was a late addition. When it comes to Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton, this feud is going to extend. It's intended to be a long-term feud. There aren't many heels at the very top on Raw right now. Aleister Black could get a shot against Drew McIntyre, but going into Survivor Series, it is McIntyre versus Orton, and that will be it until at least the draft in October, possibly at least until November for Survivor Series. The reason we're not getting the match is because they don't want to have 4 or 5 matches in between now and Survivor Series. You'll get bored of McIntyre versus Orton. This is also the reason the win wasn't particularly conclusive. It was a pure wrestling match in which a wrestling move beat another wrestler. It's also because it's not conclusive means we're likely to get a big moment, as it were, and a rematch in that. Soul Starling says, any news on other returns? I have mentioned on this channel and on Backstage Heat, which is the Twitch show that we do, that Sami Zayn was going to be returning. I've also mentioned that on Sportskeeda as early as Monday. So I understand I'm on a lot of different things at the moment, but please do try and keep track as much as possible. I think I mentioned it last week as well. So definitely something worth tuning in for, mentioning that Sami Zayn would be returning. The Usos aren't far off. Charlotte as well isn't as far off as a lot of people seem to think. The initial expectation was that she would be out until just after SummerSlam. It's going to be a little while longer yet, but she is training and she is almost ready to return. Xavier Woods is probably the next big return we will see in ring, even though he's already returned. He is training right now, so he is preparing to return to the ring. And as we know, he's up and about, and he has been behind a Retribution mask a little bit. Sean Garner says, do you think Roman Reigns is winning the title tonight? I do not believe he's winning the title tonight, but that's something I'm not particularly confident about. My predictions will be coming a little bit later. So Sean, who has also asked about Sasha and Bayley losing the tag titles, I will answer that a little bit later in my preview. Jermaine says, is WWE going with Bayley versus Sasha at Clash of Champions, or Bayley versus Naomi, or Bayley versus Mandy Rose? Which one is it? Reports seem to suggest that Clash of Champions will feature Bayley versus Naomi. Bayley versus Mandy Rose is still expected down the line, though. I sort of expect that Mandy Rose will be the next SmackDown Women's Champion. I mentioned this weeks ago in some of the preview stuff to SummerSlam. I had every expectation and had been told multiple times he would be winning at SummerSlam and then moving into the title picture. That has come to fruition, but there may be more of a push for Naomi, who definitely deserves a bit of spotlight before that happens. If we're going to have Sasha versus Bayley, let's make it WrestleMania. We can have Mandy Rose win a title and then Sasha Banks take it from her. And at that point, we then could have Sasha Banks versus Bayley. Still sounds as good to see him back. I'm guessing in reference to Sami Zayn. I do agree. Star Wars Lounge says, I know it's not Payback related, so I'll save this question till later if you'd like. But any word on who's winning the NXT title next week, or at least maybe a prediction? I predict Finn Balor will be our next NXT champion. I do not know for certain. If I did, I wouldn't say so anyway. Ooh, okay. Next up was a mention on the plan for Sasha Banks and Bayley, and I've actually already answered what I was planning to say there. The plan for Sasha Banks and Bayley, to my knowledge, is not to have them competing with each other directly anytime soon. Naomi is set for a title shot. Mandy Rose is also set for a title shot before we start to approach the idea of Sasha Banks versus Bayley. But I will, of course, talk about this more in the predictions, which are coming up very, very soon. So soon, in fact, that they are coming up right now. So, on the kickoff show, we have the Riot Squad versus the Iconics in a match that was always planned for the kickoff show. They've already had a match here, and Riot Squad lost it due to some disagreements between the two, accidental disagreements between Ruby Riot and Liv Morgan. My expectation here is that Ruby Riot and Liv Morgan will get the big win, and as it's on the kickoff show, I expect faces to go over quite a bit. They are also, and one of the reasons this match is on the show, they are also building a new version of the women's tag division. They've been doing it for a little while. Now is supposed to be a big moment for that. We are likely getting Natalya versus Asuka, and that's why Natalya and Lana aren't involved. But the plan is, whether or not Sasha Banks and Bayley retain, the plan is that Raw is now going to host all of the women's tag teams, at least for a little while. Raw is going to be the home of those tag team titles because Tamina and Naomi aren't a tag team. Carmella isn't available. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, who are the only tag team left with the exception of Sasha Banks and Bayley on SmackDown, have now broken up, and there is still a story to go there. They are building new tag teams. The Iconics are already well established. Liv Morgan and Ruby Riott, I expect, will get the win here. I'm going to answer a couple of questions that aren't related to the predictions and then get back to them. So Star Wars Lounge says, is Orton going to take out any more legends soon like he already has with HBK, Flair, and Big Show? That was just in the build-up to SummerSlam. That was intended to be just in the build-up to that big match. At this point, the storyline with Drew has already started. The reason they did that and had Drew acting as proxy was just to make sure that Drew and Randy didn't actually have that much interaction because the storyline is still going to continue. Dominic Perez says, you think Tucker will cash in? I don't know how Tucker could cash in, given he is not the Money in the Bank holder. I'm guessing you mean Otis. I don't think Otis is going anywhere near a match featuring Roman Reigns or The Fiend. I just don't. They are so far above him. So Starling says, where is Carmella? Good question. Carmella herself just hasn't been called into work, to my knowledge. They simply don't have anything for her, so they're keeping her off TV. She's using the time very well to work on other business ventures. I do hope that you check some of those out. The Bear podcast, as it were. Oh, it's just very entertaining stuff. Bear with us, I believe it's called. Sean Garner says, when do you think we hear anything on Tessa Blanchard's future? Soon. Definitely soon. I know the WWE, I was in fact the first one to report that the WWE had an interest, and I expect that we'll be hearing sooner rather than later about her future. However, I don't think it'll be just yet because the WWE are struggling to make sure that they aren't seen to be paying a lot of money or hiring people. It sounds ridiculous, and this is one of the reasons they haven't announced Rey Mysterio's new contract yet, even though to my knowledge he has signed a new contract. The reason they haven't announced it is because they want to be seen to be saving money because they just released so many people. So I expect we'll hear about Tessa Blanchard sooner rather than later, probably from Tessa Blanchard. Mags, welcome, sir. He says, no question, just wanted to say hi and keep killing it with the content. I appreciate that. I appreciate the support there. I also very much enjoyed your post-show, or was it a pre-show? I enjoyed very much your show with Warren Hayes, what I saw of it at the time. That was very fun. I do implore people to go and check that out as well. Max is a content creator. I've been on his show. I have never built my Mount Rushmore. I have not been on that particular podcast, but I'm sure that day will come if I ever stop trying to avoid answering that question. Anthony says, what do you think Retribution does tonight? Honestly, nothing. I don't think they do anything tonight. There are more matches on this card than there was on SummerSlam, and they are still planning to keep it to about 3 hours. So I don't think that we'll see Retribution tonight. There are also theories, of course, that Roman Reigns and Paul Heyman are involved in Retribution. I'm sure they want to pick that up and build it as well. Sean asks, do you think Tessa signs with WWE? Personally, yes, I do believe she will sign with WWE. That is not a report. That is an opinion. Star Wars Lounge, thank you for so many questions. Thank you, so many new faces as well joining us. Thank you. Says, I don't really see Otis catching in anytime soon. I'm kind of happy he won it because it was a surprise, but I don't see him getting over any more of the fans unless they do something drastic with him. I think when it comes to a cash-in, they will definitely wait until there are fans again. But I have mentioned a few times on this channel, I don't necessarily see Otis succeeding with it, particularly with Roman Reigns back and potentially a champion very soon. Anthony says, is it possible WWE could wait till January around the Royal Rumble to announce Tessa, or would you save her as a big surprise? I don't think they would actually tie her down to a contract and not use her. They would at least have the big surprise moment of her appearing. It could be that we, right after Payback, get Asuka versus Tessa Blanchard. That's possible. Personally, I still think Natalya would be next in line unless Shayna Baszler does not win tonight at Payback. Soul Starling says, it's good to see Vince back on screens. I agree. I thought he played a very good red herring. I was convinced on SmackDown that Retribution was going to attack Vince McMahon. That didn't happen. A shame, but they did well with it. Anthony says, I think you're the best. Thank you very much, Anthony. I do appreciate that. Sean, you've asked this question several times. I don't know. I don't know when anyone is going to beat Bayley. I can't say it's on this particular show. There is so much up in the air and so much changing. I don't think anyone can answer that question right now, including Mandy Rose, Bayley, or Vince McMahon. John Lee says, Tom, do you think we'll see Alexa tonight? I do. That will play into my prediction later on, just as I get to these. Anthony, I see what you're saying there. I'm not going to highlight it on the stream here, and I'm not going to say whether or not I agree. But what I will say is that honest journalism should always rise to the top. Dishonest journalism should drop like a stone. They've been very lucky in the fact that certain people have sold accounts to them, and I really wish people would stop doing that. The next match on the pre-show is Big E versus Sheamus. I did predict we would see this as a rematch on SmackDown. It was originally planned. However, there was also going to be a match between Miz and Morrison and Heavy Machinery, but they had to scrap that because they just ran out of time and squeeze them all together. Big E versus Sheamus will be a win for Big E, in my opinion. Sheamus has been built quite strong and then seemingly abandoned again. So it's a strange situation for him, but Big E is being pushed strong. One of the reasons I think a certain champion is retaining later in the night is for that reason. Going through the questions, Anthony says, if you've seen Dominik Dijakovic's tweet and delete the numbers were decoded to Sunday. Dominik Dijakovic is a artistic troll. He has done great work convincing everyone that he will be on every Raw and every SmackDown, even now. I don't know if he's in Retribution. I know he has been one of the people wearing one of the masks. Star Wars Lounge says, are we going to have another Punk Lesnar situation this time around with Reigns being allied with Heyman? I think so, and I hope so. I very much hope so. If we get the opportunity of Reigns versus Lesnar again, I know a lot of people are undoubtedly bored with this match, and it's one we've seen a lot of. But with Paul Heyman in the other corner, that really does change things. Oh, sorry. Sean Garner says, if Sasha and Bayley retain, who do you think will be their challengers at Clash of Champions? I'll get to that in the prediction in a bit. Anthony says, are WWE going with a Shawn versus Razor at Clash of Champions? That does seem to be the plan at the moment, and that's one of the reasons AJ Styles is not getting a rematch, at least at this point. Jermaine says, so the plan is to keep Sasha out of the women's tag title picture after her and Bayley lose them, because I kind of like the idea of Sasha teaming with someone else like Natalya win the titles. Sasha is currently on SmackDown, so she cannot team with Natalya. The plan is, at the moment, from what I can tell, to not have Sasha Banks and Bayley competing for the tag team championships immediately going forwards, to give them a little bit of time out of that, which is why they are building up a tag division on Raw. Jagged says, hi Tom, what's going on with Matt Riddle? I feel like he's getting lost in the shuffle as of late with that lame storyline with Corbin. There were initial plans to really push him hard, get him to the Intercontinental Championship. However, that moment did not come. A large part of this was the return of Sami Zayn, so they chose to go a different way with that one. One of the reasons he hasn't been pushed quite as strong is they've been making room for example, Roman Reigns and some returns there. They have been running out of time on Fridays. And this is one of the reasons that Matt Riddle hasn't been getting the opportunities that he's been promised. There are also, and I won't go into detail here, some personal issues and some questions he has had to answer backstage, which has kind of defeated a push that was initially planned. Soul Starling says, any news on WWE Backstage, the show? WWE Backstage has been cancelled by Fox. It will not be returning. If you're referring to Backstage as in Backstage Heat, which is my show with my colleague Rick Uccino on Saturdays at roughly this time, so it's 6 p.m. EST, 11 p.m. UK time on Twitch, you can follow at twitch.tv/backstage team. There will be more than just that show coming to it. Shikwa Tuwari says, Reigns versus Big E at Mania 37. I would have no issue with that. No issue whatsoever. However, I don't believe Big E's push is intended to last that long. I believe Big E will be getting a championship match soon, maybe much sooner than Mania 37, and then he's likely to move back into the tag division. However, the round robin rule that the Freebird rule, that the New Day currently use, especially once Kofi and Xavier Woods have returned, is likely to see one of them competing for a separate championship than the tag championships at some point in the future, including a potential King of the Ring tournament, which would include Xavier Woods. Anthony says, how amazing would it be instead of Brock, another Paul Heyman guy, CM Punk returns? CM Punk has no interest in returning to the WWE. Is it true Corbin didn't want a job to Riddle right away? To my knowledge, no. I know the person who reported that, and I'm sure they were told that. But to my knowledge, that is not the case. The story went that Corbin had said that Riddle would have to work with at least 5 people who are enhancement talent. Baron Corbin, from everything I know and from everything I've been told, is very much a company guy. If he was told to job to Riddle, he would job to Riddle. If he was told to be squashed by Riddle, he would be squashed by Riddle. He has, of course, been squashed in like 30 seconds by Finn Balor before now. He's a company guy. He would have done whatever he was told. So from what I've been told, that story is not true. The Star Wars Lounge said, any news on Barrett getting back in the ring of him commentating on NXT this week and next week too? There is no intention at the moment for Bad News Barrett to step back into the ring and compete at NXT. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't happen later on. He was originally just brought in for the one show. They sounded him out at the time and said, do you want to come back for another one? He did. That is how it will happen going forwards. It may be that one week they say to him, hey, do you want to jump in for a match next week? And he goes for that. It will be that sudden. Anthony says Riddle versus Roman or Big E versus Roman have to be in the Mania plans. Also, The Rock versus Roman could be in the Mania plans. There are a number of possible Mania plans, including Roman Reigns potentially not even being there. This particular WrestleMania is the least planned WrestleMania I am aware of in modern history. Usually they have a year ahead knowing what the main event matches are going to be. This year, no clue. Soul Starling says, how long does NJPW Summer Struggle last? Not that I don't know why you're not watching it. Jinku, which was the pay-per-view show, lasted 2 hours and about 20 minutes. And it had 6 matches, all of which were very varied and very good. The actual Summer Struggle was a collection of shows building up to the pay-per-view. The one you want to watch is Summer Struggle Jingu. I very much highly recommend it. And it does say a lot about what's planned for the G1 this year, which I can never stop recommending. John Garner says, does Tessa announce her own signing? Not if it's in the contract that she can't, which would be the case if it was WWE. Anthony says, Wade Barrett is a type of guy that would be the kind of guy to seek retribution, wink, wink. He was brought back to commentate on NXT. There was no plan when retribution started to have Wade Barrett anywhere near it. Can't say that hasn't changed. Anthony says, I heard Tessa is on her honeymoon. Can't comment. Even if that is the case, and even if I knew that, that is her personal business. Jermaine Presley says, Tom, have you been? Any chance of taking a vacation? Kind of. I will be going away for a little bit, and I say a little bit, I'm going to take a month elsewhere in October, from middle of October to the middle of November. However, I will still be producing content at the time. At the moment, I am overworked, but in about 2 days, I will officially be done with the day job, and so I will be full-time creating content here. Yesterday, I did 4 recordings in one day. And that was for the Twitch channel. That was with my colleague Stephanie Chase on her Instagram, which was about New Japan. And that was on Backstage Heat, which unfortunately had a few technical issues. The new streaming software is partly to answer that. I still have quite a lot of time off once I'm no longer working the day job as well. Anthony says Barrett isn't advertised for any of the NWA stuff, so that's something to keep an eye on. NWA have been losing a lot of people. To my knowledge, Barrett will not be returning to the NWA. Tiger says, also what has happened with Mauro? I'm not sure. To my knowledge, he's just unavailable at the moment, so someone else is filling in and he'll be back soon. Shakar says, any news about Seth Rollins possibly taking time off in the near future? First I've heard about it, but we know for certain that he will be taking time off when his child is born, because everyone else is taking time off when their children are born. That is already scripted in, that is already planned, and I'm sure it will be quite a strong period of time to get to know his child. You know, all credit to him. Sean Garner says, is Mia Young being called up to the main roster? Yes, she is. Anthony says, with Vince being on TV more, I'm scared he's actually the leader. I would be unpleasantly surprised if he is revealed to be the leader, the higher power of Retribution. Stunned. But yeah, I don't think you can be entirely surprised. Anthony says, is the security actually finally doing its job keeping Retribution out? Nah. Not of Raw, anyway. Anthony says, I think Retribution doesn't show up late because it's past their bedtime. I love you guys. And Soul Sterling says, yes, Seth needs a break. He's been working a lot of shows. He's been working extremely hard, especially in ring as well. Incredible performer. So I would not blame him if he asked for a bit of time off. I will keep track and report anything that is planned for that time off. We know Seth Rollins will be taking time off near the end of the year. I did report that Becky Lynch would be taking time off after WrestleMania. That did happen. The next match is Matt Riddle versus Baron Corbin. And yes, I do believe Matt Riddle is going to defeat Baron Corbin after roughly 10 to 12 minutes. Baron Corbin will still get everything in. Chad Gable will still be involved, but Chad Gable has been shown to be sort of ineffectual, hasn't he? So I do believe this will be Matt Riddle winning. He will be moving on to different things from here. However, it will more likely be Matt Riddle versus Sheamus or Matt Riddle versus The Miz. They are struggling at the moment with the faces that they have and the people they have as champions. Because now that Jeff Hardy is Intercontinental Champion, with Sami Zayn potentially winning that from him to reunite the belts, we could then see Riddle versus Sami Zayn. I think that will be where they're going, but it'll take a little bit of time to do that, so Matt Riddle might not be on our TVs for a little while. Next match is a United States Championship match between Bobby Lashley and Apollo Crews. It is nice that this will finally not be on the pre-show now that MVP is not formally involved. However, the original plan for SummerSlam was to have this match and was to have Bobby Lashley win the United States Championship. That United States Championship belt was made for Bobby Lashley. It's also very possible his next contender, or at least one of his contenders coming up soon, would be Brock Lesnar. Wouldn't that be exciting? It also potentially means that if Matt Riddle versus Sami Zayn is a future of the Intercontinental Championship at Survivor Series, we may see Damian Priest versus Matt Riddle versus, who did I just say? Bobby Lashley. That'd be fun. Bobby Lashley is, I believe, going to win the championship here. That is based on being told repeatedly that Bobby Lashley would be winning the championship at SummerSlam. The match was never formally announced because MVP has been doing more work with people and they wanted to extend Apollo Crews' championship reign a little bit longer. Let's get back to the questions. I'm just going to do a quick note there so I don't lose track of where I am. Right. Jermaine Presley says, do you have any idea of what would be the match card for Clash of Champions? At the moment, I don't really want to say because a lot of it's down to who wins tonight. When it comes to Clash of Champions, every championship will be on the line. That includes the women's championships, tag team championships, and the individual championships. I don't believe Bayley is doing double duty again. We'll get to that in a bit. But every championship will be on the line. Bobby Lashley is likely to have a rematch with Apollo Crews. I do believe we will see Jeff Hardy versus Sami Zayn at Clash of Champions. Beyond that, I think we'll see a rematch of Randy Orton and Drew McIntyre. Outside of that, it's hard to say. Sean Garner says, what show is Mia Yim going to be on Raw? Not sure. If she is part of Retribution, as is rumoured, she will not be unmasking until the draft at least. And after that, we will see where Retribution land. Sean says, if the Fiend retains tonight, then who will be the one to beat him? That is booking way in advance. That is fantasy booking, and that is something I will potentially only be answering based on if the Fiend actually does retain tonight for my prediction a bit later. Anthony says, Seth versus Ray indicates to me Ray and Dominic wins tonight and Seth wins tomorrow. There is a rematch scheduled. I say a rematch. There is a match scheduled between Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio tomorrow during Raw. That does sort of give away the game a little bit for me, in my opinion. And it could well be at that point that we split from this. I think that is the moment at which they are getting rid of this particular interaction. Seth moves on to other things, and so do Ray and Dominic. Anthony says, are we official on WWE announcing a draft anytime now? It won't be anytime now. The plan for the draft is to announce it sometime in September and then have it sometime in October. They have not formally finalized when the draft is going to be. They initially wanted to do it right after WrestleMania as a superstar shakeup. They pushed it back because they didn't have fans. The reason they're doing it in October is because their current contract at the Amway Center says that they cannot have fans in the building. However, they will be able to renegotiate that contract and they will know in October whether they can get maybe 10, 20% capacity. That's one of the reasons they've moved to the Amway Center, so they can start bringing in fans. Anthony also says, what are the chances that the Universal and WWE titles switch brands or the US and the IC? I say Universal and WWE are highly probable. I think they are people who need new opponents. McIntyre needs new opponents, and whoever wins at Payback and potentially keeps the championship all the way through could be requiring it. The only championship that definitely isn't changing hands is the NXT championship. I would not be too surprised to see the US and North American championship, for example, changing brands. Jagged says, SmackDown has stacked a lot of star power and they don't have any idea how to use it. I'm not sure they have as much star power as you might expect. At the moment, there is a clear top level, that being Roman Reigns, the Fiend. Just under that, there is Braun Strowman. And then there's a quite big drop until you get to people like Daniel Bryan and AJ Styles. I don't think they've used them all particularly well, certainly at times, but I think AJ Styles has been used quite well. He can't always be in the top scene. I think if Roman Reigns does win the championship, AJ Styles could be stepping up there, as could Daniel Bryan. And I think a Roman championship run, whether he wins at Payback or not, it means a lot more people can fight at that top level. Anthony says, do you think Naomi versus Bayley at Clash of Champions? Yes, I do. I think Naomi versus Bayley will happen at Clash of Champions. Bayley will retain, and then it will be Bayley versus Mandy Rose afterwards. Jermaine says, when is the draft? Is it after Hell in a Cell? I did mention that just briefly. There is no conclusive plan at the moment for when the draft is going to take place because they are waiting to see what they can negotiate in their Amway Center contract before they then make a formal decision. Anthony says, if the Retribution group is drafted to any brand, that would be the dumbest thing. I agree. This is why Retribution are not planned to be unmasked until after the draft. Soul Starling says, is Moxley a heel? Nope, he is not a heel. He is an anti-hero, which is why he can work with people like MJF and why I feel that people like Brody Lee, Brian Cage have a good shot at getting more matches. I think Lance Archer is another shout at being the next AEW champion, but Kenny Omega could potentially turn heel as well, making Moxley versus Omega that interesting match also. Sean Garner says, who should be Io Shirai's next challenger? She's working through them. There aren't that many at the moment. Chelsea Green is believed to have moved on. Mia Yim apparently has also moved on. I would say Candice LeRae would be the next challenger for Io Shirai, but it could also be Raquel Gonzalez. I don't think, unfortunately, Io Shirai is going to be champion that much longer, but I think she will be champion until the draft, at which point we're going to see quite a few people move into NXT. Naomi, I thoroughly believe, is moving to NXT in the draft because she had said several times that she wants to return, and I think NXT would do much better with her. Anthony says drafting the IC title to NXT would be cool. It would certainly open up some options. Anthony also says out of Rhea or Io, who gets a call up at the draft? Rhea Ripley should have been called up a long time ago. They are getting in the way of an absolute megastar by not having her on the biggest stage. That is my opinion of this. John Garner says, will Roman have new entrance music and new gear? No, he will not. He is still going to be wearing some form of chest protector because he needs it to hide a belt that prevents him from getting hernias. It is a health concern. He needs that covering. When it comes to new entrance music, to my knowledge, there is no new entrance music. Don't expect anything new from Roman tonight, other than Paul Heyman. Anthony says Dakota Kai and Raquel should be called up there ready. I agree. Big fan of Dakota Kai. I've mentioned this before. I started following her when she was working in Japan as Evie. I do recommend people check her out with that. Star Wars Lounge says, I'm so happy that Brody Lee is doing so well in AEW. It would be cool to see Rowan eventually join up with him in the future. I'm not sure he needs to have Rowan join up with him. I'm sure Eric Rowan, now Eric Redbeard, has options on the table. He's actually a lot better than the opportunities he got at WWE. I do know that Brody Lee has reached out, though. He has. It's just, I'm sure he's reached out in standard friendship, but I was one of the first people reporting that AEW were going to be bringing in Brody Lee. Immediately after he's released, I was saying that Chris Jericho was advocating for him backstage in meetings. That has been confirmed even just this week by Chris Jericho. Eric Rowan is not someone I believe they are discussing at the moment, but I do know that there are options available to them. AEW right now is they have too many people, and either they need to focus on a very small amount, or they need a currently in the planning a second show. Anthony says, do you think at the close of Payback, Alexa is aligned with The Fiend? I will get to that in my prediction. John Garner says, who beats Moxley? No idea. So, in fact, I actually answered that I believe it's going to be Lance Archer, but I'm not sure. Next match that I wanted to cover was Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax challenging Sasha Banks and Bayley. And when it was going to be Shayna Baszler and Asuka challenging for these championships, that was when Sasha Banks was going to lose. That was when Asuka was going to lose at SummerSlam, and Sasha would have retained the Raw Women's Championship, formally splitting up Sasha Banks and Bayley. That was changed quite last minute, and now I'm really not sure. I'm going with, for my prediction, Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax. I don't know why they're telling the story they are, but I know that makes that new tag team division that they are planning for Raw. Sasha Banks and Bayley will then move back to SmackDown full time. They've done great things. There will be a rematch because this means Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax can also move across to SmackDown. Potentially, we can see Shayna versus Bayley, a Clash of Champions. We could see that at any point. We could see them competing on SmackDown against Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. It opens up a plethora of options. So I believe Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax will be winning that match. One more for the road. Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio will take on Seth Rollins and Buddy Murphy one more time. This match was interrupted by Retribution. I think if we are going to see Retribution, this is when it will be, because they seem to be focusing on the Mysterios at the moment, teasing that Rollins is involved. So in the last couple of weeks, we've had teasers that The Miz, Roman, Wade Barrett, and Seth Rollins are all the leaders of Retribution, including also Mia Yim, Dominik Dijakovic. This is good booking. This is actually good booking. I think Rey and Dominic are going to win this one. I think Seth will win the rematch, as I believe, I think it was Anthony mentioned earlier. I think that is the route that they're going to go with this. I think the fact that there is a rematch gives the game away a little bit. I think this will be the big moment between Rey and Dominic that Rey has been desperate for. He wanted this moment, and he was originally planning to retire until Dominic said he wanted this moment, and I believe now is the moment. Jermaine Presley says, will WWE turn Sasha anti-hero after she splits with Bayley, and is Charlotte staying on Raw when she comes back? Charlotte, when she comes back, is expected to be on Raw unless she returns after the draft, at which point she will likely be on SmackDown. When it comes to Sasha's alignment, they are planning to have Sasha Banks be Sasha Banks. There is a level, as it were, that you reach in the WWE where you don't need the face or heel dynamic. Face and heel is just a tool to try and get people over. Once they are over, like a Roman Reigns, like a Charlotte Flair, like a Finn Balor, they reach beyond. And once they are beyond that, like I believe Sasha Banks is, they just work in their own character rather than working with a particular alignment. Anthony says Alexa would help the Fiend as his mouthpiece since he doesn't talk. I think if we're going full time with the Fiend, that's not a bad shout. And Anthony also says when the Usos return, should they return aligned with Roman? I believe they should, and I believe Naomi should also go with that group. I believe Paul Heyman representing Roman Reigns, Jay and Jimmy Uso, and Naomi would be a faction that dominates in the style of a New Japan. Thank you to the 21 people who have joined so far. Do asking questions. I'll just finish off the predictions and then get the last few questions. 21 people, thank you for joining. Please do remember to click like on the video. This is actually a record for my personal YouTube, keeping 21 people happy. Earlier we had 26, which was amazing for me. 2 last matches. Keith Lee will be taking on Randy Orton, and this is where I feel Drew McIntyre could definitely be involved. This will be very similar to the match that we saw on Raw, where Keith Lee sort of dominated Randy Orton. Randy wants to work with Keith Lee. Randy requested this match, and as a part of this, they are keeping McIntyre out of the picture for a little while. I think Keith Lee beats Randy Orton tonight via interference from Drew McIntyre. I think Drew McIntyre provides a distraction. Keith Lee defeats Randy Orton. I still think Randy Orton will be competing with McIntyre for the WWE Championship going forwards, but I think you can't really introduce someone much better than if you introduce Keith Lee by beating Randy Orton. One last question before we get to the main event. Star Wars Lounge, thank you for so many questions, everyone. It's going to be really sad when Ray does retire. I agree. He's always been up there for being my personal favorite. He should have won the WWE title more times than he has. I do agree. When it comes to world championships, Ray has had a very rough ride. Some of the most heelish things Cena did were against Rey Mysterio. The main event for Payback and the match that they have been pushing so hard is the return of Roman Reigns in a triple threat, no holds barred match with Bray Wyatt, The Fiend, and Braun Strowman. They have been pushing this one so hard. The Universal title has never felt bigger than it feels during this match. We get the return of Roman, who one, had a big return, two, had a huge moment on SmackDown when he was aligned with Paul Heyman, and now he's going into a massive match. Those three things combined make this the biggest storyline that they can possibly do at the moment. My prediction here is that The Fiend retains, but there are so many possibilities. I believe Alexa Bliss will get involved. I've just screwed up my hair completely. I believe she will provide a distraction to Braun Strowman, and I feel that this is part of, I went quite in depth in the Smack Talk, which is our Friday post show after SmackDown on Sportskeeda's Facebook and YouTube. I went quite in depth on my expectation that Alexa Bliss is now dressing like Abby the Witch. I believe this is because she is enamored or entranced by The Fiend and will attempt to make him take her back, essentially re-kidnap her, to make him fall in love with her. She will attempt to emulate Sister Abigail, because that is someone Bray Wyatt has always loved. She will not be Sister Abigail. I believe Bray Wyatt will retain, and I believe going forward we will see The Fiend and Roman Reigns battling it out for a while longer yet. This would mean also that depending on what happens at the Fatal 4-Way in NXT, we could see at Survivor Series Drew McIntyre versus Roman Reigns versus Finn Balor. That's if Roman Reigns wins. Also very possible because Alexa Bliss could also distract The Fiend. That would take The Fiend out of the match, which makes it just Roman and Braun Strowman, which Roman would definitely be winning. Braun Strowman has been instantly defined down by the return of Roman Reigns. I'm just going to go through my last few comments and questions. Becky Dea Carter says, is there anything new on Sonya? Sorry if this was already mentioned. I missed the start. We didn't already mention this. There is nothing new on Sonya Deville. At this point, I hope there is nothing new on Sonya Deville until she returns. I'm not a journalist who's going to be poking and prodding that one. I really want to just leave her alone. So I understand people asking questions. I have nothing new. Sean Garner says, if Mia Yim isn't a part of Retribution, then when do you think we see her on the main roster? Really not sure. Vanessa Bourne's been there for ages. Chelsea Green as well. Star Wars Lounge said, is Jeff Hardy still planning to be getting his No Words theme when the crowd eventually returns? His wife did confirm that is the plan. That is still the plan. It may be returning for the Thunderdome, but that depends. This is all part of the negotiation concept. If they can negotiate a deal with Amway Center that allows them to have fans in, even at some capacity, No More Words will be playing. Anthony says, imagine Keith Lee versus Seth, now that Roman is heel, WWE better get Lee versus Roman while he's heel. I don't think we're going to see Keith Lee versus Roman Reigns for a while. Again, I don't think Roman is technically a heel. I believe at the moment he has simply reached that level where he doesn't need either face or heel. He'll just be coming in, wrecking everything, and fans are really going to cheer for that. This is going to be Roman Reigns' top run. This is going to be Roman Reigns at his best. Everyone is going to be behind this guy. Keith Lee versus Seth is undoubtedly in the works. Jagged said, what's the plan with KO versus Alistair? Alistair Black is going to beat Kevin Owens. And then Alistair Black is looking at potentially getting a championship match with Drew McIntyre somewhere along the road. There are a number of people Alistair can compete with. We could see another shot at Apollo Crews, for example, but Alistair Black is a heel as of now. I mentioned this on Monday's Raw preview that he would be turning heel during that show. Oh, it just opens so many options, and I'm excited by it. Anthony said, with Fiend as face, let's get Fiend versus Orton program. Could happen, depending on the draft. It also could happen with both as champion at Survivor Series. Imagine the Fiend, Randy Orton. Oh, I'm gonna play this like full fantasy booking. I mentioned this on Backstage Heat, but let's mention it here. Imagine, and this does require some gymnastics, if the NXT title hadn't been vacated. Imagine Randy Orton beats Drew McIntyre at Hell in a Cell. He's holding his championship aloft, and then the Fiend arrives, walks down to the ring, swinging his lantern, puts the lantern on the apron, walks into the ring, stares down Randy Orton. The lights go out, the lights come back on, the lantern is gone, replaced by an hourglass. No sign of Karrion Kross, no sign of Scarlett. The Fiend's lantern is gone. Randy Orton and the Fiend stare at the hourglass. Such a shame that Karrion Kross is injured. Jermaine Presley says, any chance we get the Fiend versus The Undertaker at Survivor Series? Unfortunately, none whatsoever. Vince McMahon is going to try and get The Undertaker back to WrestleMania. Sean Garner says, will Edge be champion again? To my knowledge, there is no plan to make Edge the WWE champion at any point going forwards. The initial plan was to have Randy Orton versus Edge in a third and final match at SummerSlam. That would have been the I Quit match, I believe it was supposed to be. The I Quit match that would have ended the feud. Drew McIntyre was scheduled to face Brock Lesnar. That didn't happen. Edge became injured. They didn't get fans back like they were expecting, so they weren't able to have Brock Lesnar travel. So everything changed. There is no plan to have Orton versus Edge at WrestleMania. To my knowledge, I don't believe that was ever the case, because Drew McIntyre is expected to still be in the title picture at WrestleMania. Jagged says, is KO right now working as an enhancement talent? He's not working as an enhancement talent, but he is repaying a few favors. Wrestlers aren't always winning matches. When they do, they get booed. If you're always winning, you get that Roman Reigns, John Cena effect where people boo you. Kevin Owens is trying to help elevate some of his friends, some of his colleagues. He's trying to help Alistair Black get pushed as well. I think that's a very noble thing to do, and I think it's good when people do that. Jermaine says, you'll be safe in your family. Thanks for keeping us wrestling fans informed. That is all I'm trying to do here. I very much appreciate that, Jermaine. Same to you and same to everyone here. All I'm trying to do with my YouTube, with everything, is keep wrestling fans informed to make sure people know what to expect. I will just get back to the question before this, but Graziak Fortuna says, thanks for the video. I'm calling it today and getting to bed. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for enjoying the video, and thank you for your kind words. Star Wars Lounge says, is Gargano any closer to getting called up to main roster? I feel he should have been called up after his program with Ciampa ended. Gargano has told NXT management he does not want to be called up to the main roster. However, he was not as clear about it as Tommaso Ciampa was, so it's possible. I think our first feud, if Gargano is called up, will be against Daniel Bryan. However, I feel if he is called up, it'll be in the draft, and I'm not sure he will be doing so. Sean Garner says, when Brock comes back, who does he face? Hopefully Bobby Lashley, but probably Roman Reigns. I have gone through the whole card for Payback. I did want to briefly touch on my expectations for the G1 climax in New Japan Pro Wrestling. If you guys aren't New Japan fans, I do highly recommend it. Having watched the show at Jingu, I've mentioned this on Stephanie Chase's Instagram. This is just the last couple of minutes of the video. My expectation is that we are going to see a lot of people unable to make it. I don't think we'll be seeing Jay White in this year's G1, which is a big loss. I don't think we'll be seeing Jon Moxley in this year's G1. However, I believe Evil is the favorite, and I believe Hiromu Shingo will have great years. However, Evil is definitely the favorite for me. I expect he will be in the same side, same block as Sonata. That's what I'm expecting from the G1. We will be doing live coverage of that. I'm trying to get Stephanie Chase much more involved because she's a huge New Japan mega fan. And she's sort of converted me as well. Jagged says, thanks for the info, Tom. I really appreciate your work. Thank you for the kind words. I'm really happy everyone's enjoying these videos. That's really why I do them. Star Wars Lounge says, whether Balor becomes the NXT champion or not, is a plan to keep him in NXT long-term going forwards? Yes. There is no plan at the moment to either use the Demon King or move him out of NXT. Watch him be the Demon King on Wednesday now, or Tuesday, I think it is. But there is no plan at the moment to see that. He wants to be in NXT. He's very happy in NXT. There is no intention for him to ever leave NXT again, as far as I am told. That is all the questions I have. I want to thank everyone for joining me. I'm going to take the next 8 minutes or so to essentially relax before Payback starts. I hope everyone is joining me on Twitter. My Twitter is @Colohue. That is COLOHUE. Please do join me there to talk about wrestling. I've just broken 10,000. I'm very, very happy about that. Thank you to everyone joining. We had 26 people at one point, which is incredible. Thank you to everyone who asked questions, everyone who's clicked like. I've been Tom Colohue. Thank you very much for joining me.